Okay, so I'm live from the tent in the field, by the way. The last episode, number 12, was essentially the first episode of the Human Story series. What's percolating in my head now is that this whole 6 weeks of lockdown, or the 40 odd episodes that I'm going to commit to, a good proportion of that is going to be basically a rough draft of a documentary. So nothing too fancy, just still images on like a slideshow basically for maybe an hour and a half, something like that, with my voicing it. So basically a podcast to pictures, but done with fucking, I don't know, I'll try and do it as theatrically as I can, if that makes sense. That's kind of what's percolating in my mind, and maybe to do it as a collaboration with somebody else. I like the idea of making a documentary on something. I love the idea of documenting this idea I have of shooting the pig and butchering it, and you know what you get out of it and where it comes from and what has to happen to it to turn it into rashers and to sausages and whatever else. Because I was actually at a friend's before, and he had a pig on a spit. You know, the rotisserie thing. They shove a big giant rod down the butchered pig's mouth and basically out its ass, and they put it over a fire and they twist it, you know, for fucking a day or two over low flames, and once the middle of it hits a certain temperature, the whole thing is good to eat. And I couldn't wait to get my hands at the different parts of it. But little did I know, it was all cooked the same way. Obviously it was literally in rotisserie style, so it was all cooked exactly the same, so the whole thing tasted the same. I thought that the rashery bit was a certain part of the, I don't know, fucking abdomen or something, and I don't know, like I don't even know what was in my head, but I didn't realise that it was all exactly the same meat. But you know, rashers are hung and dry and smoked and salted and cured, and they do loads of shit to all different parts of pig to get different meat dishes from it. I'm no fucking chef, lads. But anyway, enough about pig meat. At the end of the last episode, I said that the next episode, being this episode, was going to be about the migration throughout history of humans, basically. But I was thinking against that since I think if I explained step by step as best I could how humans went from Ethiopia and spread around all the world, that'd be grand, and then I'd be able to tell you that all other animals evolved kind of the same way. I don't think you're going to get that. I think it's much better if I show you how, I don't know, some other animal, maybe a fox or something, how it went from where it started off in Africa and then spread it over the continents. There's going to have to be enough crossover between the human story and the animal story I pick. But I think if I explain that to you of an animal and how it moves, and then say humans are the fucking same, and here's where all our first ancient civilizations are, you'll be able to see, oh fuck yeah, okay, I kind of get it, like. But anyway, I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to do that tomorrow or possibly the next day. It's going to be the next thing I talk about, but I haven't finished talking about humans specifically. I've already said that we're mammals, we're warm-blooded, we're predators, we're omnivores, but I never mentioned that we were prey, and that's important for forever, since right back to Australopithecus. It'll get out there somehow. Australopithecus, there we go. He's the oldest human, basically. He's as far back as our species go until the next thing is a chimpanzee, or it's a different species. Okay, so as far back as Australopithecus, and way back further, to the dawn of fucking life, basically, we've been prey. It's only very recently that we've become apex predators. We didn't evolve, technically we evolved to be apex predators with our fucking nuclear bombs and our fucking, our fucking, just our arsenal of weapons, everything from the fucking bow and arrow to, an ICBM. Anyway, it's crucially important that you understand that we were prey, or we have been prey for all of time. For all of time that's relevant, we have been preyed upon. So we have innate fear in us of being preyed upon by predators. That's why we're intuitively terrified of, sharp teeth and claws and fangs and snakes and cats, big cats. Anything with big teeth, big eyes, we're inherently afraid of these things. Spiders. Spiders were no less dangerous back then than they are now. Only, these days we've got hospitals and anti-venom and fucking medicine and shit. And I'm not going to get into it now, but there are incredible psychological consequences of this, because of this phenomenon. You really need to understand that in order to understand psychology generally, I think. You don't need to understand it. I'm sure some of the greatest fucking psychologists that ever lived the thought never entered their head, but it's very fucking helpful in understanding human beings to understand that throughout all of their entire genetic history, going back to fucking single-celled organisms at the bottom of the fucking oceans, everything's been preyed upon in one form or another, and that's deeply, deeply, deeply embedded in us. It couldn't be any deeper. It's part of the essence, part of exactly what we are. I hope you're not picking up too much of this fucking wind tunnel effect that I can hear here, but the wind is starting to pick up out in the middle of the field, lads. Some sketch here, telling you. Me and me little tent. Oh boy, off the lead, what? Anyway, yeah, it's just so important that I get across that concept, if nothing else, that being preyed upon, having things that will come and get us and kill us and eat us, that's ingrained in us. So to not be aware of that is a big mistake. The other thing that I didn't mention was our adaptability. Okay, you'll often hear people say, oh, that's the thing that separates us from the animals, blah, blah, blah. I hate when people say that, because you hear it said about 50 different things, and each time you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, that's the one. There's loads of things, that's the one, okay? And this is just one of them. But part of our adaptability has been our ability to dress for the occasion. We can adapt things around us, plants and whatever, and make clothing to keep us warm. There's great shots of I think it's orangutans. Chimps might do this as well, and indeed gorillas, but I'm pretty sure orangutans do it. They'll grab down a load of a particular type of branch of a tree with a particular type of leaves on it, and will essentially make a little umbrella for itself. Now, it's not too fucking fancy. They just slap a load of fucking these things across their heads, but they sit in out of the rain. Like, it pisses rain all the time. Why would you get wet when you can stay dry? No other animal does it, but they do. So from that kind of stage in human development, that's when we started. Like that, an animal taking leaves and putting them over his head to keep his head or his body dry, that's essentially the start of clothing. That's where clothing came from. Clothing wasn't invented in Mesopotamia in 6000 BC. Like, clothing, that's how it came out of the ground, basically. All these things that we consider to be human-made or man-made, they've all evolved. Like, our fucking sense of smell has evolved and our eyesight has evolved. It's all came with us through forever. And the more we can understand about who and what we are, where we came from, and what we have evolved to be and do, the more we can understand that, the more we can see the more visible the contrast between that and the actual lives that we have is. So it's our ability to adapt and to dress ourselves that's enabled us to live in the coldest places in the world. Like, we can live side by side with polar bears. Put a polar bear in the blistering heat of the Serengeti and see how long it takes to die of heat exhaustion. Like, it cannot cope with the conditions. Likewise, a lion would be no good to you 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle, because it's just going to shiver for an hour and then freeze solid, and that'd be it. Like, they'd probably both last about as well as each other, not at all very long. But us, on the other hand, we can dress ourselves to insulate ourselves. We've learned to turn the skin of an animal into what we call leather. I mean, it comes already insulated with the fur of the animal. Turn it inside out and you've got a rugged, warm, dry cloth. And hop, skip and jump a couple of 100 years, a couple of 1,000 years, a couple of tens of thousands of years, and you've got, Levi's. How far we've come. Anyway, you stick a human north of the Arctic Circle and it'll freeze to death just as fast as the lion, but not with snowshoes and insulated leggings and underwear and thermal clothing of modern stuff or ancient stuff. Anything, you wrap yourself in enough stuff, being mammals, being able to create our own body heat, we'd be able to survive. So long as we're insulated to a certain degree, we'd be able to survive. And then in the blistering heat of the Serengeti, we'd sweat a lot. I was about to say we sweat like FUCK, and a good if I've heard one thing more than anything, it's about how much I swear. And my thoughts on that up until yesterday even actually were, fuck it, like I don't care. I swear a lot to myself, so I'm essentially talking to myself when I make these recordings. So I do what I do and I swear, and that's kind of it. But I was chatting to a friend of mine last night, just over WhatsApp. He actually texted me out of the blue. I hadn't heard from the man in years. Shout out to Bernard Smith. Hi Bernard. Bernard actually helped me out with two things. But three things. Firstly, he basically just got in touch to say he was enjoying the solos, which meant a fucking lot. Nice one, man. Secondly, he mentioned about the swearing. He said that he was listening to in the kitchen with his kids, and he was like, oh, I have to turn that off. And when he said it to me, I was like, yeah, well, I swear, so that's not changing. Like I've said it to everybody else. But since, it's just got me thinking, the type of stuff that I'm starting to talk about now is exactly the type of stuff that I want kids hearing. Kids can't hear this stuff early enough. Now, maybe not some of the fucking darker stuff. The swears keep creeping in. It'll take a while to weed them out. And I'm not going to weed them out entirely. So, kids who hear you swear, why can't they hear me swear? Occasionally, obviously. Anyway, I digress. And I hope the wind is picking up here. Oh, close my little window. Hold on. There we go. Apologies. Yeah, so when we're in the Serengeti in the blistering heat, we sweat a lot. We sweat profusely, but that cools us down, not as a function. We tend to view it as something we wish we didn't have. Like I'd say a lot of us have wished that, I wish I just didn't sweat at all. And that's grand today when you're in your fucking Levi's and all the rest of it, in your climate controlled fucking living rooms. But when you were starting out, or your species was starting out, or when we were in Africa originally, or even now, if we're out in the sun for too long, like if we get caught in the desert, we last a hell of a lot longer than something that can't cool itself, essentially. So let me think. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here. I'm not going down that tangent. I'm going back. We can sweat. It's great. I'm going to cut down the cursing because I want kids listening. We're back in the room. And the point remains, we're adaptable. That's the other key thing that I need to get across, as well as the fact that we've always been prey animals, but the fact that we've been so adaptable. We've been able to alter our environment, our physical beings, basically. We've been able to cover ourselves so that we can survive literally anywhere. We made footwear so we could walk up the mountains and cross continents, basically. We built boats and rafts. We're ingenious cunts. But tool building and all that will be maybe in the next episode. But that's enough for today, and I'll chat to you tomorrow. But before I let you go, I'd just like to remind everybody that this episode and all the episodes on YouTube have been brought to you by past guest and friend of the show, Pat McKeown. Pat is very similar to myself insofar as that he's long had an interest in the mind, and more specifically the brain, and how they both interact, to such an extent that he went and spent 4 years getting a degree in neuroscience, and then spent a further year in getting a master's in psychology. Now, what he's done is pretty fucking cool. He's after setting up his own YouTube channel. It's called Pat Psychology Masters, and there's a link in the description. Now, what he's done here is he's uploaded all the best bits that he's learned over the last 5 years and put them into short, plain English, easy to understand YouTube videos for the likes of myself. His YouTube channel has been a massive resource for me in understanding both my mind and the mind of others. So hit up Pat Psychology Masters YouTube channel, subscribe, give it a like and a comment and a share. All that kind of stuff helps, and I'll chat to you soon.